Hi everyone, and welcome back to the last installment of our seasonal seminars. This one is going to be focused on the winter solstice and how to care for your yard during the winter months. I'm Ashleigh Diaz, the Sustainability Manager, and I'm here today with Tiffany Wright, the Watershed Manager. So Tiffany, stormwater is typically associated with rain events, but how is it actually connected to snow?
So that is how a lot of people think about stormwater. In fact, that's sort of how I do, but really stormwater is precipitation that just runs off of hard surfaces. So it can be rain, it can be melting snow, and either way it takes pollutants with it. So what our goal is in the winter to try to keep ourselves safe, that's paramount, while we also protect our streams and aquatic life.
Okay, so you mentioned safety and how safety is paramount. Let's get into that topic first. Arguably, one of the safest ways to deal with snow is to try and get ahead of it, right? And using preventative measures. So what advice do you have for our listeners in regard to that?
Sure, so the most important thing is to plan ahead. So we know winter comes with some regularity, and we just want to make sure that we have the appropriate equipment for dealing with snow. So you might need to get a shovel. You may want to get a snow broom. Some people around here even get snow blowers. I don't know that that's always necessary. In addition to equipment, you want to be sure that you keep an eye on the forecast and pay attention to what type of snow is going to be falling, what sort of precipitation are we going to get.
That's right, because there are two different kinds of snow. There's wet snow and then there's dry snow. And wet snow has a lot more water in it and it's a lot heavier, to my understanding, can cause more damage. And the dry snow occurs in the colder temperatures. It's a lot lighter and fluffier. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So folks from New England and the Northeast know that yes, colder temperatures mean drier snow. Around here, we rarely get, into the 20s, so we typically have a heavier, wetter snow. Not only does that more easily mobilize pollutants, in particular de-icing chemicals that we might put down, but it is heavier, like you said, and it can be a little bit more difficult to remove. I mentioned before about preparing, so just keep an eye on the forecast to know what sort of snow we're going to get so you can best approach the removal safely.
Okay, and in terms of removal, there's salts and de-icers. Which ones are best?
So I happen to think that the best de-icer is the one that doesn't get used. That said, we do want to protect human life, so we're going to have to do something. And there are liquid and solid options. So I guess if we kind of step back into like a big picture, transportation agencies, such as the State Highway Administration, use a liquid brine, which is 80% water and 20% salt. And you probably have seen the lines on the roads just before a snow. What the brine does is it'll soak into the pavement a little bit and it'll warm it up so that as soon as the precipitation hits, it doesn't, automatically stick or freeze. Those aren't the best solutions for residential applications. Those are more of like the solid, the salts and sands. Just a side note that if you do drive over a brined road, be sure to take your car to a commercial car wash because that material can be really corrosive to the undercarriage of your car. Just a little tip.
Yeah, so that's the liquid application, the brine, that's usually used in emergencies by State Highway. What about the solid application, the salt and sand options that residents might have?
Sure. So a couple of options that I see a lot, and I'm sure we've all used them, are sand and salt. And this is what's important to remember is that sand is mostly for traction. It will not melt snow or ice. The inverse of that is salt, which is a melting agent. It dissolves into the snow and the ice, and so it's not going to help you with traction. Perhaps when you immediately throw down rock salt in the big cubes, you might get a little bit of traction, but we typically want to use the solid applications depending on the kind of snow that we're going to get.
And what about people who are looking for alternatives or people who are concerned about maybe their pet's health?
There are alternatives to the traditional rock salt. Those are magnesium chloride and calcium chloride. Of course, rock salt being sodium chloride, just really your table salt, just a little different formulation. But those are more expensive and they are typically used in colder climates. So rock salt will work down to about 20 degrees and the calcium and magnesium chlorides work down to 0. So the areas where it's much colder during the entire snowstorm, they will often use those. Around here, we stick with the rock salt. In fact, the city sticks with the rock salt and a sand mixture. There are some pet-friendly alternatives. Calcium magnesium acetate is the sort of the chemical compound that you'll typically find in some of those pet-safe de-icers. The nice thing is that they don't have salts in them, and pets licking salts off their paws can make them sick. The other thing is it's a little bit easier on their paws when they walk. You know, we're going to take them out, they're going to run down the sidewalk or something, and it's just nicer to not have the hard rock salt that they're walking on.
Yeah, that's great to know. And in terms of shoveling, because I know sometimes residents don't shovel, either they can't or they don't know that they should be shoveling or they don't know what to do, but there actually are some city code requirements about that. Can you elucidate a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a requirement for the city that you remove snow within 48 hours of the end of precipitation. And there's some information on the city website about that. Manual removal is the best way. It's the fewest pollutants go into our storm drains and our streams. If that's not an option for you, you do need to clear the sidewalks. You might have families that are taking their kids to the park to sled, and they don't want to have their strollers in the roadway, or folks using wheelchairs. We don't want them to be in the middle of the road fighting with cars. So just be sure that you get out there if you and shovel, and if you need help with that, you can register for the city's Neighbors Helping Neighbors program. That's where senior citizens and folks with disabilities can register with the Department of Community Services, and they match up volunteers with property owners that need help with shoveling. So it's a great option. I'm really glad that we have that.
Yeah, that is great. Now let's bring it back to safety, because you mentioned in the beginning that safety is paramount. What other tips do you have, just closing out about the shoveling and the snow care, what other tips do you have for residents?
So I'm sure that we've all heard our, weather people or the news anchors talk about, please be careful. We get an uptick in heart attacks and back injuries during the winter when folks are out shoveling. So you want to be sure that you shovel smart. And it's not an old wives' tale, folks. So stay hydrated, take breaks, and stay warm. And remember, you have 48 hours, so you don't have to be out there in the middle of the snow shoveling it while it's coming down. If you'd like, you can sit inside with some hot cocoa and watch it from the sofa. Just stay warm and hydrated and take breaks.
Now we're going to switch gears and talk about how to take care of our yards during the winter months. So a lot of people will leave their garden beds as is, and they'll save the pruning for the early spring, and then they'll cut back their flowers and their shrubs in the early spring if able. And that's a really easy tip for residents. But in terms of trees, what other tips do you have for tree care during the winter months?
Sure. So viewers of our fall equinox video will know that the fall and the winter are a great time to plant trees. You can get the roots in the ground, they can get settled, and they can get anchored during the winter before all of the above ground things start to grow and use energy. The other important thing is that winter is a good time to prune trees. Most deciduous trees around here, winter's a good time to prune them. The nice thing is that the tree itself is dormant, but also the critters, potential insects or diseases or like a fungus or something that might be on the tree will also be dormant. So when you make that wound, when you cut it, those things aren't necessarily going to infect it really quickly. So that's the most, that's the most beneficial part of pruning in the winter. And of course, make sure that you mulch around your trees. And if you have any leaves left over in your yard, just be sure to chop them up.
And when mulching, follow the 3-3-3 rule.
Right,
and
right.
That is, for viewers at home, that is putting the mulch 3 inches away from the base of the tree, about 3 inches deep, and spreading out to about 3 feet around the tree. This way you avoid creating a mulch volcano, which can suffocate the tree's roots in the tree. Do you have any other basic tips for our listeners for over the winter months?
Yeah, there's just one other thing, because I am into stormwater. I wanted to mention rain barrels. So a lot of folks have rain barrels around here. And what you'll want to do is be sure, just generally you want to clean your gutters. So make sure there are no leaves. If we get snow and it accumulates and melts in the gutter and then hits a big, glut of leaves, it'll freeze and potentially cause an ice dam. So you want to make sure your gutters are clear. And then if you do have a rain barrel, it doesn't typically get cold enough around here to freeze solid. But just in case, we recommend draining about 1/3 of the water out of your rain barrel and disconnecting the downspout from the top.
Okay, great. Those are really great tips. Lastly, let's talk about the programs that we offer. Would you start us off with Plant One Tree on Us?
I would love to. So winter, great time to plant trees. I know everyone knows that now. And we do have a program. We're actually planting some right now. So we're finished our winter planting, but in the spring we'll open our request form back up online, cityofbowie.org/plant1tree. And you can just go on there and request a native tree to be planted in your yard by one of our contractors. It's a good size, it's a landscape size tree, so it's somewhere in the 4 to 8 foot range when it's planted. And we have 11 different native varieties. It's just like it's a really cool program.
Yeah, that's really great. And that's just one of our many programs. We offer compost bins for your backyard, food waste bins if you're in the program area. We have energy audits, and energy audits are free to the first 50 homes each year. And this is when you have a contractor come out and do a comprehensive audit on the energy efficiency and even the health and safety of your home. So we encourage you to head to our website, follow us on Instagram, or subscribe to our newsletter to learn about all of these options. And Tiffany, we always get so many questions about volunteer opportunities, and I know you have a few coming up in the spring. Could you expand on them a bit?
Sure, yeah. So we've got our annual stream cleanup the first Saturday of April, unless that Saturday happens to be during Easter weekend. But the first Saturday in April, and we often do the first Saturday in October. And then we have storm drain marking program. So if you have a small group of folks, or maybe a bunch of students from a class want to come out and mark our storm drains, just little small markers that say no dumping drains to waterway, because we know anything that enters the storm drain, rain, snow melt, de-icers, all of that stuff is going to get into our streams. So those are two things to volunteer, and you get students can get service hours for both of those. And then of course the Weed Warrior, and we have the Monarch Way Station cleanups.
That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we hope you enjoy watching all of the episodes of our seasonal seminars. They can be found on the City YouTube channel on the Seasonal Seminars playlist. There's also a Sustainability Webinars playlist, and we'll see you in 2024 with more sustainability content.
Thank you.